Hello and welcome to the Choral Podcast. I'm Chris Muntz and this is episode 35, Equity Pitfalls in Online Music Instruction with Dr. Emmy Burch. I am really excited to have Emmy on the podcast. Emmy is an excellent choral music educator, but she's also new to the choral music podcast scene. She's got about 5 or 6 episodes up on a new show called Music Matters, and you have to put music ed in parentheses. Matters because there's a couple shows with similar titles there, but she's doing a great job launching her podcast, and I thought it would be fun to do a podcast exchange with Emmy on a very important topic. When I say podcast exchange, I mean you'll also be able to find this conversation on her channel, but I encourage you to head over and check out her content as well. So the topic of the day is well-intentioned possible pitfalls related to equity when we're talking about bringing music instruction online. I know we're all aware of some of the challenges as it relates to disparities in access to technology, in access to internet access, in home life situations that might make it harder for some kids to learn at home than others. So really this conversation is about shedding light on what some of the things that we felt were under-discussed aspects of this topic, that as we move into the fall and into the next school year, into a world that is very likely to be more online, whether we're talking about COVID-19 issues or whether or not we're talking about just an advancing world of technology where more instruction will be demanded online. In my district, for example, we're even talking about online instruction instead of having snow days so that we don't ever have to extend the calendar again. You know, those types of things, those are coming. And so what types of things can we do to help prepare our students for this brave new world of online music education in ways that maybe we haven't already thought about? So we both acknowledge that this current semester ending for most of us online with almost no preparation is not a sustainable model. We did the best we could. We went home and created things, and we all the different conversations online about getting creative and figuring out solutions. We did what we could. But if we have to engage with our students in this way in the future, we're going to have planning time now. Like, we're going to have a chance to regroup. It's almost like thinking of a battle metaphor. We just got our butts kicked for the last 2 months. We get to retreat over the summer, most of us, and regroup and retool and think about if we get to start with classes again, even some of them in person, maybe some of them hybrid, can we better train our students for what types of activities we might want to do with them online so that we can reduce some of those equity issues? So that's going to be the topic of this episode, and I think you're going to really enjoy the conversation and maybe even be thought-provoked. But of course, that is the brand of this show, is to have your thoughts provoked. So stay tuned for that. Before we get there, I'd like to shout out a critical sponsor during this time for this show, which is sitereadingfactory.com. A lot of you guys already know how valuable they have been as a company, but also as a product during this online music time. And I think by now you should understand that going forward into the next school year, this is going to be a critical tool for you. They have provided so many free accounts during the pandemic that, just unbelievable step up that they did there. They can't do that forever, though, so plan ahead with your budgeters for next year, if you can, to get a membership for every single one of your students for use in class during regular school. Critical and so amazingly helpful. But if you have to go online again, that tool is already established. You've already trained your kids how to use it at the beginning of the year, and those assignments and the grading capacity and the connection one-on-one with your kids if you get stuck at home again is awesome. So go to sitereadingfactory.com, sign up for yourself, sign up for your students, each individual accounts, and you can put Choralosophy at checkout at the end of that process to get a 10% discount. And that's an awesome tool. Another tool that we'll be able to use for upcoming year is Voce Vista Video. VoceVista.com/Choralosophy will allow you to download for free for 30 days their software that creates an overtone analysis of live singing into the microphone, but also of importable recordings of singers into their software that analyzes the overtones produced within the hearable spectrum of whatever your microphone that you're using is. And so I do recommend, if you that works better with better microphones, but even with kids' iPhone cameras. they can record some spectrum of the recordable, frequency spectrum, and it can show them a picture of how they're singing, including formation of vowels, which of course shows a different overtone pattern depending on which vowel you're singing. And if you're not sure what that means, what that would look like, I encourage you to go back on my podcast feed. There's a short, about 11-minute episode that kind of demonstrates and explains how that product works. But in an online environment, that could be one of the huge tools that we can use as voice teachers, but also as choral directors, to make sure that we can still give kids detailed feedback on how they're singing in an online environment where we can't really hear them directly. So I encourage you to check those folks out. So again, sightreadingfactory.com and vocevistavideo.com/choralosophy. If you choose to purchase either of those products, you can use Choralosophy at checkout for that 10% discount that you know and love as listeners to this show. All right, let's move along. With no further ado, I bring you Emmy Burch. Okay, I'm here with Dr. Emmy Burch, who is the host of the brand new Music Matters podcast. And I think we can all agree it very much does. And we're going to be broadcasting this episode on both of our podcast channels. And I'm excited to have a conversation today with Emmy.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Thanks. Welcome to Music Matters. Since it'll be on both platforms, it's an honor to be here and look at your face and actually have a conversation, since you've been such a huge help as I've gotten off the ground with this podcast platform. So thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, yeah, I'm excited. The podcast medium is something that I feel very strongly about. Obviously, I've invested so much time in it, but I've noticed that during quarantine, there have been quite a few new choral podcasts popping up, and which stands to reason. And I think the way I look at it is we need more in-depth conversations about what it is that we do. And one thing I've said a lot on my show is that the idea of a presentation at a convention is one important way that we get information about our art form and our profession, but it's not enough. You've got to be able to take that and go deeper into it and have conversations back and forth to really understand stuff. So I'm excited about that. So what should we talk about today?
I really want to hear your opinionated opinion, because I know you have that. I want to hear your thoughts on what do we do now? I know that you and I are in the same camp of choir isn't ending. The world is not ending. We will find other ways to impact our singers and our families and our communities. But I want to know what you're thinking about those hard to reach people, the people that might not have easy access. How are we helping break down limitations and barriers?
Yeah, and I would only clarify that the camp that I feel like I'm in right now is not quite that we're going to find other ways to impact. I think we're going to find more ways to impact.
Yes.
I don't know.
Good clarification.
Yeah, because I don't know that ensemble singing is as dead as some panic mongers led us to believe right away. But it's not that it's going to go away, and I've been on the record lately that it's going to change for sure. We're going to have some areas that can't do it. We're going to have some areas that can, and even in the areas that can, it's going to look very different. I was talking to some of my students virtually the other day about what choir might look like next year, and we talked about just the gigantic amount of space that we might be putting between our singers that compared to what they're used to. But the good news for me in my class is my kids are already used to that, because I've always been a space out as much as we can person anyway, because I like the idea of singers developing what I call peripheral hearing, where they're expanding their concept of how far away they're listening all the time. So one of my students said, well, that just sounds like what we do anyway. And so, I'm fortunate where I am, where I have a gigantic choir room. Like it's huge.
You're Midwest, right? You're Missouri, Kansas City.
Yes.
That area.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, our schools aren't that big. Our spaces aren't that big.
Right. And that's going to make a huge difference. And I've got, so I'm lucky in that way. But to your question, that I still very much am on the side also of let's be prepared for all the contingencies, right? It is definitely possible that even though a lot of the data, if you get it from not clickbaity 4-minute read articles online,
Mm-hmm.
we're getting a lot of good news actually about the way that this is all gonna go or could be going, but that doesn't mean it will.
Right.
Predictive
Right.
models are almost never right. They're always either too far to one side or too far to the other side. So it could get worse. Like we could absolutely have, be told to lock things back down and go back online. I think everybody acknowledges that. So the question to me becomes, if in the situations that we can't sing together, what are some things that we could be doing that engage more and more of our students? So so before I get to my opinionated opinion, um, I want to turn it back to you real quick. When you went online, was that in March at your school?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did now at the college level, because I think there's going to be some differences here because I teach
Right.
at the high school level. What percentage of your students started engaging right away with the online content?
About half of them. Now, I am at a little bit of an advantage because my class, the courses I was teaching were already 50-50 blended. They were 1 day a week online and 1 day a week in person, just because I live 2.5 hours away from my institution. So my students were already used to that online platform, but the level at which they engaged dramatically changed over the course of our time after March. So there were a couple that were slow to get in and figure out the mute button and how to set up the computer so they could also take notes. But by week 2 or 3, it was like we're completely different, engaged humans. And the work that they were able to put in once they figured out the time management was actually better than the work prior.
Interesting. And I was gonna guess that your answer was gonna be something like that. In other words, would you say it's fair that in your experience it started kind of rocky and then got better?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
But I also communicated a ton with them, and I know that that can be time consuming, and I opened up my phone for them. They were able to text and call when they were having technical difficulties, which I know not everyone can do or is comfortable doing.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that was
So at the secondary, in particular, public school level, I think a very similar experience to what I experienced, that a lot of my colleagues are experiencing, is that it's the opposite of that.
really.
That our situation was, it started out pretty good and then got worse.
Did the
Um,
kids disengage?
yes, and and this is where so I've talked a little bit on the show too about equity in education and how I see that very differently from a lot of my colleagues. But of course, I see everything differently than everyone. So I'm
Favorite
that's
part.
normal. That's normal for me. But I saw the rundown for me essentially was, we were also lucky that we already had an online digital education platform called Schoology that we were already using, and had been for years. So the kids were relatively familiar with it, and we had already been told at the beginning of this last school year that to prevent snow days from taking days out of our calendar, we were supposed to have at least 1 week of online content designed already. So,
Wow.
but it wasn't because of a pandemic. It was because that way, if snow days happen, we don't actually have to have a snow day. We simply deliver the content online and don't have to add an extra day to the end of the school year. That was a system they were already working on in place. Now, it wasn't, we weren't told that we had to have it done yet. So, like, not all teachers were done with it, but we'd already at least started the process. So, we were lucky. So, on day one of online education, I probably had 70% of kids already engaged. Okay. So, like, on the very first assignment, most of the kids turned it in. And that level held for a couple weeks, a week and a half maybe. And then I started to see on education pages and circles memes starting to be shared about how when we grade kids doing online work, we're actually grading their privilege.
Very
Okay.
much so.
Well, yeah, I think it's not that simple, because here's what happened. Our district decided at that point, and I don't fault any of my colleagues in my district, because I think that was all really well intended, and just like those memes, I think they're well intended. but they decided to make a policy where the student's grade can no longer go down after from before we went on online work.
The school system in my town did the exact same thing.
Yeah, and then the immediate result was that my engagement from students fell to about 35%. Okay, so I believe my opinion is that removal of grades caused a bigger equity problem than what we were dealing with before, because now the only kids who are being educated are the ones who have the privilege of having, in my community it's going to be different everywhere, but they have the privilege of having parents at home who are making them do the work. And that cuts across racial boundaries, even income boundaries in some cases, and it becomes just about which parents see the value in the education that they're being given to hold their feet to the fire and make them do all those assignments, even though they might have had an A on March 13th when we went home, and their grade can't go down, so they're just going to keep that A. And almost all of 2/3 of my students went that route. And so one of my controversial opinions on this is that what's best for the largest number of kids in our classroom is where we should start, and then tackle equity problems at the margins.
Okay.
Because if we had if there are a big group of parents, in my opinion, who if the grade is still attached to the assignment, they will follow up with their kids and make them do it.
They have to have that tangible thing. Otherwise, they don't.
Yes.
They might not understand the value or place value in it. That grade, for whatever reason, carries so much value
Mm-hmm.
to
Yep.
parents.
Yep. Absolutely. And I think sometimes us educators, we like to live in a pie in the sky world where we like to say things like education's not about the grade and it's not about teaching to the test and all of that. But we have to remember, we walk around and talk to other educators who think school and learning is awesome. And that's not how everyone perceives what we do. Many parents, they want their kid to get the GPA, they want their kid to get the grade to be able to show the improvement on paper. And if we take that away from them, then we might be increasing the equity problem that's there. So I don't know. I feel like if we have to do more of this in the future, hopefully the advantage would be that we will have a chance to plan ahead.
Right.
For it, and that's where I say I don't fault my colleagues for making those policies, because we were on the fly, like
We were
just
totally flying.
Yeah. Making this up as we go along. So in your school, are the students responsible for their own technology devices, or is that something that's part of their student fees?
So that was, our students have their own devices. Our college students have their own devices. And that was interesting because what they didn't have control over was their internet. So I had a couple students who, thank goodness for cell phones, they had a couple weeks where either Wi-Fi was down at their house, they were going to grandma's house to get Wi-Fi, they were calling into class instead of videoing into class. But I think the reason they were able to still stay engaged was because I was first engaging. Every Monday, I sent an email. Every Tuesday, I sent some type of text message. By Wednesday, I asked to see their progress in the week. I was really on top of them for the first couple weeks. And that way, when things like internet issues came up, it wasn't as big of a problem. Now, I do have a community choir. And as you're talking about these grades, it's making me think, because we have plan A, go back to normal singing, plan B, plan C, plan D, etc. All the different flexible ways we can handle moving forward. Do we need to, as a community choir organization, instill some type of reward system so that parents see the value in all the different things we'll be offering moving forward? Is it about the reward and the grade more so than anything else? The product does the number and the grade trump the product?
Oh no, not at all. But you have to. I think those are apples and oranges, in my opinion.
Okay, how so?
A community choir and a school choir you're dealing with two very different groups of people and how their outlook on the arts is.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a parent who has signed up and probably paid dues of some kind for your child to sing in a community choir outside of school, you
Hmm.
already going in are putting yourself in a sample size group of people who already care more about their kids singing.
Right.
They're in a public school environment. Of my 270 or so students, I would say that probably 100 of them, when they walk in the door, at least 100 are there purely to get the state mandated fine arts credit. Okay, so
Okay. So they're there for different reasons. The
they're
the
there for
why is different.
correct. And now, if I do my job well, of the 100, maybe those half that walk in the door thinking they're just getting their credit, and then I hook them and they stay for 4 years and they do all the more advanced things or whatever. But when they walk in the door, that's why they're there. And part of the problem with what happened this school year is that our our culminating events at the end of each school year, that are the most meaningful and memorable and fun for our students, happen at the end of the year,
And they didn't happen.
and we didn't get to do those. So another thing we were very lucky in my district was at least we already had our enrollment for next year before we went home.
That is
So,
lucky.
our signups for choir have already occurred. So we already got to do that process. We do ours in February, which it's funny because my whole career I've complained about how early that is and how it's not enough time for them to develop a love for for choir and to develop their skills and all that. But in this case, it
It's
could
a
have possibly
blessing.
it could have saved me from having a drop of 100 kids for next year,
I
just not being able to see them. I'm going to jump in real quick and interrupt the conversation to remind you that the real driving force behind supporting this show on a regular basis comes on my Patreon page. Patreon.com/choralosophy has a variety of ways for you to support the show and vote with your voice and vote with your $3 a month at minimum to keep this show going and make sure that the recurring costs of putting on a show like this are always covered so that I can do it forever. That is the goal. So that group is growing over there, and as the first level kicks in at $3 a month, which is about the cost of a coffee. And you'd be surprised how those little contributions monthly start to add up and really make a difference in my ability to concentrate on the resources that I'm trying to create here on the Choralosophy channels. There is also a new producer level. I'm going to shout out the producers of the show going forward: Christopher Vasquez, Kyle Peterson, John Van Zant, Michael Herron, and Ryan Main. And then finally, there is a Swag Patrol level, which is the $5 a month level, which is going to get you access to all of the content that's on the Patreon page, but also you're going to get in the mail one of those awesome Choralosophy t-shirts that you can see if you go on my Instagram or on the website. So I encourage you to help out in that way if you can. And now back to our conversation about equity with Emmy Burch.
I think something that this conversation is really opening my eyes to is someone who is not in the trenches beside you, but kind of in the outskirts with my little community group, and then kind of looking in from a different direction with the college students that I'm working with. These are questions that they need to be thinking about and need to be transferring the knowledge to. It's not just about recruitment, but about engagement. And can we go back to something you said about the privilege of parents? What are some ways, other than the grade, what are some ways that you're thinking about getting all of like helping with that equity? What are some of the things you're thinking about moving forward?
Well, so one of the things that I was a little concerned with right away was when we started going online and seeing the virtual choir explosion, um, was that, in my opinion, a virtual choir itself, if you're talking about public, well, not public or private, but working with kids in a
Mhm.
choir, especially if you're talking about a broad spectrum, like I discussed, uh, comprehensive program where you've got flat out beginners, like that have never sung before, all the way to the advanced kids, which again might be different than a community chorus that has an audition maybe, or whatever. Again, it's a different sample size of the group. But in my situation, I did not embrace the virtual choir movement as a um, as a way to keep kids singing together, because I saw it as an equity problem. For me, the kids that could have successfully done a virtual choir would have been my top kids. And then there, and
Right.
then, and even if I picked out something really, really easy for the kids to have done and did it with my freshmen, say, there would have been a pretty sizable handful of my freshmen that would not have been able to successfully complete that product because their musical independence is such that they're not quite developed enough yet to where they would have been able to do that without me there to kind of walk them through the process, which of course at school is my job. And so I decided not to go that route with my kids because I didn't want to leave those kids behind because they would have been left out. I would have had to. They would have recorded something, and it probably would have been completely incorrect. And then I would have had to, in this tough environment where they're already really emotional, send them an email that says that wasn't in tune enough, or it wasn't on time enough. You have to do it again. And so, to me, there's nothing wrong with a virtual choir, but as a substitute for the class project, I don't. I in my environment would have been an equity problem just due to vast differences between ability levels that I'm dealing with. If you've never seen a quarter note before or don't know, or if you're having pitch matching problems in your adolescence, then a virtual choir probably isn't for you. And I even had somebody say, well, why can't you just mute their track and make it seem like they're singing? And I mean, I could, but just
that's a character thing.
Yeah, just because the kid can't match pitch doesn't mean they're stupid. They're going to know that they weren't really in it. We don't. So to your, that was a long rambling response, but to going forward though, I think if I had more time to plan and prep the kids on the process of that, and even if that were to mean that if we come back to school in the fall, but with still some possibilities of, hey, we're back to school in person, but we need to be ready for like a 1 week shelter in place to happen. Like if that happened just because there was an outbreak and the local authorities thought, hey, everybody better stay home for another week. And those are possibilities everywhere. Right. So, and I'm just guessing, but I'm guessing that I'm going to be told by my bosses that we all have to be ready for stuff like that. Okay.
Our chancellor told us the same thing.
Yeah, right. And so in that case, I might do a project at the beginning of the school year where I get a chance in person to teach the kids how to do these. Okay.
Excellent.
In which case, and that could be a project that we even do in class together. And because another thing I'm lucky with where I teach is that we are already 1-to-1. So the district provides each kid a device. And we even provide them internet access through a hotspot if they demonstrate the need that they don't have that at home. So they have a little Bluetooth thing they can bring home, and it creates like a cell signal Wi-Fi thing that they have. So every kid that we have, if they follow through, has a device and Wi-Fi at home. Which again, not everyone has that.
Not everyone has that opportunity.
And I get that. So we're very fortunate in that sense. But that's probably where I would start, because there are cool opportunities for group expression through a virtual choir. And I don't want anyone to think that I'm poo-pooing that. It's just that I didn't do them this year because I had kids that would have been left behind.
I think just so I'm a list maker. You're talking about equity in a few different places. And I think that that's the key as we think moving forward, because there's equity in the amount of parent involvement and the value that they place on either just being involved in what you're offering with or without grades. There's equity in skill level from your first time singers to your last ones. We did a few of the virtual choirs where they just send the audio track and then we recorded the Zoom with everybody in it and they all lip synced, which was not the best possible scenario, but it removed one of the elements. One of the barriers was they're all middle and high school girls and they didn't want their faces seen while they were concentrating on getting the correct notes and rhythms.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a conversation they had. And so we decided that they'd only have to get dolled up once to do the Zoom call. They loved that. And they could, at that moment, see themselves and really practice on the engagement expression feature. But that's another story. I think that you have the parents and the grades, you have the different ability levels you have to reach, you have all the devices and the technologies that they need to have access to and know how to work. But then how I think you've said something, you've really tapped into something I hadn't thought about before. The melding, almost like the blended course I have. You're melding what you could do virtually to what you could do if you're in person. You're looking at not just if we're in person, if we're virtual, but melding the two in a way I hadn't really thought about. Preparing them of the process through the process of what they might do if we stay virtual to still have success.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the way I'm looking at it is that the way, at least where I live, I see that as the most likely scenario that we will be up against an in-person environment, and I'm guessing for us that will occur on time in August, like that we'll be back to school. Just to give you an idea, in my risk assessment episode, we talked a lot about population density and prevalence around you. I live in a county that includes a major city in Kansas City, Missouri, where the total county population is 690 something thousand. And as of when I'm talking right now, our total cases are still under 400, which means that that's like 0.04% of the population, and so we've been very lucky. Almost all of and a lot of that has to do with the fact that Kansas City is very spread out. Like we're very, very it's a huge land area where you can get on the interstate at 70 miles an hour and drive for 20 minutes and still be in the city limits of the town you're in. Right. So it's very spread out. And so we're fortunate. We have a lot of things that kind of going for us in that way. But I can also envision an environment where another local meatpacking plant or car factory or something like that has an outbreak. And then there's all of a sudden 500 new cases and we get some kind of a stay-at-home, schools are closed for the next 3 days. Or like, for example, we could get a case, we could discover there is a case in one of our buildings in the district, at which they probably would tell us to go online tomorrow and the next day or whatever until they've done
all the necessary cleaning.
The necessary cleaning and contact tracing and trying to quarantining the people who were exposed to that person and all the process that the health officials do. And so I'm trying to think of it pragmatically as what I'm guessing, because it's prognostication, but right. I'm guessing that our teaching environment next year will be a mixture of online and in person. So that's what I want to be prepared for.
That's really smart. Now, if in that situation, the mixture, what are you going to do to help with the equity of your students? What are you doing for those beginners? What are you doing for those people that don't have really involved parents? What's your plan of action?
Well, a lot of that has to do with whether or not we will be supported. And these conversations are going on in my district, but whether or not we will be supported in grading the kids continuously, whether we're in person or not. And I think we will be. And the reason for that is that like I said before, in this current shutdown of schools, people didn't feel, and I do think this is justified, people didn't feel that it was fair to grade the kids because none of us, including the kids, the teachers or the kids, were prepared to take all of this stuff online. Right. In which case, the unintended consequence, like I said, was that now less kids are doing work. But I totally understand why they made that decision. They're between a rock and a hard place. There was no correct decision that they could have made. But going forward, if we're able to go to the kids at the beginning of the year and lay out a policy that includes, in our class syllabi, includes, here's what we're going to do when we're in class, here's what we're going to do when we're online, so that if we go online, you are prepared ahead of time. We looked at each other in the eye from 6 feet apart, and you knew and had in writing ahead of time what our online curriculum will look like if we need it. Then it becomes easier to hold those students accountable with their grades. But if they never were told, and if it was never explained to them in class, it's really hard to hold kids accountable because you've got to stack that up against the equity problem of, I've had kids, for example, not kids that are super economically challenged, middle class kids, writing me in a panic because they can't get to their choir assignments. And the reason that they can't get to their choir assignments is that both of their parents are essential workers who are out of the house, which means they're in charge of helping their younger siblings with their elementary school curriculum, which is very involved and kind of detailed. And the elementary school kids don't know how to work the computers as well. And this is what our students are dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And that is an equity problem versus the kid who is the youngest of 5 kids and they're the only teenager in the house, and mom and dad work outside of the house maybe, but they're fine with the technology and they just sit around at home doing their homework.
Right.
Well,
So
that
you have
kid
the
has,
equity in that in the family makeup too.
yeah.
It- So you have equity in parents, equity in grade value, equity in your family makeup, equity in the technology and what you have access to.
Hmm.
I know one of my friends lives in a rural state, and we were talking on her podcast recording about students in their area that you can't even give them a hotspot because there's nothing to hotspot to. They're so out in the country that
Right,
there's just not even internet.
right.
Then what do you do?
Hmm. Yeah,
That becomes a whole nother level of equity.
yeah. I think yeah, in those cases, my suggestion would be to be thinking longer term projects that could be, for in the case of music, could be explained hopefully in a similar situation in those super rural areas. There's an even better chance that they'd get to do some in-person stuff. Um,
Mhm.
but that again, you set up at the beginning of the school year, and I think this is what we're all going to have to do. Is we're going to have on day one, whenever we get to see our kids again, a new set of beginning of the school year procedures that maybe have to leave behind some of our old beloved first week of school traditions, but that get kids
Right.
prepared for the types of projects they might have to do. And so for those in those no internet situations, I could envision things like, here's the packet of sheet music that you're going to have in your backpack. It's your go bag, right? Your emergency go bag, where and
Yes.
that's going to be ready. That's going to be ready at the beginning of the school year for those kids that don't have internet access. And this is what your sheet music, and you're going to use a cell phone or a tape recorder if that's what you've got because it's old timey or whatever. And I want you to submit some recordings when we're done, when we come back, and I'll just give you whatever time you need to get it turned in. And it's going
The
to be this long.
flexibility feature.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right. But I
Again, that's the time to prepare that.
yeah, yep.
And so that's the direction we need to start thinking of. If this is the thing we're doing for the 80% who have no equity issues or whatever, or smaller differences in the equity, what is that? You were talking about the outliers. Then we look at the outliers and figure out how to give them that same product. Our Rotary Club just did the coolest little service project. We stuffed art packets for local kids who don't have the after school programs to go to. And we stuffed these really cool art packets and got to write them a note to encourage them. And it was a week's worth of art projects.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And my kids' elementary school teachers were awesome with this too. Is they whipped up some kind of emergency go bag things for the kids so that they'd have activities over spring break. In our case, we went to spring break and then just didn't come back.
Fantastic.
The timing for us worked out that way, and so they had a packet of stuff, and that way it also gave the teachers a chance to adjust and say, okay, the first couple days, guys, just work on the packets we sent home, and while the kids were working on the packets, then that was allowing the teachers to design some more online stuff on the fly. But again, like I said, next school year, I think the smart teacher will be getting a lot of that stuff organized prior to school starting, which will be a really important part of the process.
And I think that might be one of the big perks. This doesn't have to all be doom and gloom. For me, again, it's that opening of my eyes to see that there's a level of privilege and inequality that exists in capacities that I've never thought of before in different areas. And it's my job to now equip my college students for any of those type of situations so they can bridge those gaps. But it's also an opportunity for all of us to collaborate.
Yeah,
You don't have to go at this alone. there are so many great ways to get ideas and to work on this together and to go into the fall with lots of ideas that are flexible,
Uh-huh. Yep.
but quality.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've even felt like there are certain experiments that I've done with the kids this year during this online time that I will continue to do, because for the kids that did engage, I saw real improvement that was unique to this time. For example, our work with Sight Reading Factory that I've had the kids do 3 exercises per week, and I kind of on the fly designed a rubric for them where you must turn in each of these exercises recorded through Sight Reading Factory, where if you nail it, then you get to just turn it in and you're done for the day because it was correct. But if it's not correct, then Sight Reading Factory keeps track of how many attempts the kids went through, and of course, each time you attempt, it gives them a new exercise. So it's always sight reading. So I said, you're either submitting a correct one, or you're working for about 30 minutes, which looks like about 10 attempts, and then you're submitting whatever your best attempt is in that range. Because all I want you to demonstrate is that you're getting better. And
Perfect.
the progress has been huge. Like the kids that actually did it, I had freshmen. I have probably. Are you familiar with the levels on Sight Reading Factory?
I only have seen a couple student teachers use it in their classroom, and they were all using like 3, 4, 5, but I don't know anything about what that means. It was just in their lesson plans.
Okay, got it. So the see if I can explain it this way. A level 1 on Sight Reading Factory would be things like maybe a range of no more than a fifth. All the rhythms are quarter notes and half notes, and everything is stepwise. Okay.
Got it.
So if you're a brand new, never, ever, ever sang before person, it might still be tricky, but for the most part, any of my freshmen can do a level 1 if they're given the right instructions to get going. Okay.
Okay.
And if they're not having pitch matching problems, obviously. So there's
Right.
that. And then all the way up to a level 6, which is what my chamber choir kids do for their auditions, and that's they're going into their junior and senior year. And they do level 6s, which are pretty much anything goes rhythmically, syncopation, tied notes, triplets, accidentals are fair game. It's crazy. So it's a wide range. And typically for me, in all the past years, the really top-notch freshmen would, by the end of their freshman year, maybe be pretty proficient at like a level 4.
Okay.
Okay. During this online time, I started a bunch of my freshmen during their online work at level 2s, because when we left school in March, that's about where they were. And we test each kid individually to make sure that they're reading at a level that's appropriate to them. So it's not a one size fits all.
Perfect.
It's each kid gets pre-tested. And by the time we just did our last Sight Reading Factory exercises this last week, and I have probably 10 freshmen who are reading level 5s perfectly.
Wow.
And and it's insane. And just because they're used to doing it in class with other kids, which is important, but now this online experience has forced us to make them do it on their own, which of course is wildly different in terms of training. And so my thought was, we're going to do these online anyway. When we go back, even if we're in class, and I'll probably just make them do like one a week going
Because you've
forward.
seen the progress and you've taught them
Yes.
how to practice it. Someone said that. My friend Cody said that the other day in a phone call, teaching them how to practice, how
Hmm.
to be independent. That's another big perk in this time, but we have to know all the steps to give them in order to make that a useful piece of information.
Yeah. Yep.
I think that's
Yeah.
key.
Virtual, and that kind of goes back to the virtual choir thing. It's not as simple for a kid who's struggling to match pitch or has no concept of how to read and learn a part on their own.
Mhm.
It's not as simple as just, okay, I made a master track. Here's your part. Send me back your version.
Right.
For a lot of kids, like I said, I do have kids that could do that. But for a lot of kids, they would need me to walk them through every single step and almost every single measure of the exercise. And I think if I had a chance to prepare them in class ahead of time, for those types of activities, maybe the song is just super simple, unison even. Then maybe we could make something like that and have that be an alternate class project. Like I said, I just wasn't comfortable in our current environment saying, okay, class, we're all going to do this awesome project and it's going to go on Facebook and your parents are going to share it and they're going to be super proud of you and all of that. And then I think about those maybe 10 kids of my in each of my freshman classes that would have been unable to do it. And how does that make them feel?
So secluded.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just I didn't feel comfortable going down that route, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't, I've written it off forever. It's just, I want a chance to teach them how to do that because that's not something that we learned how to do up until now.
And I think that too, that's another great positive here. We're still teaching. We're still empowering and creating. It's just a slightly different flavor.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's almost better. We get to, every time you get uncomfortable, don't you get better? I think that's part of this excitement. I'm really excited for whatever it's going to look like. I'm petrified to see, but I'm also excited because I know so many creative things are going to come out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I am an optimist naturally. In fact, one of my favorite books that I've ever read, highly recommend, is a book called The Rational Optimist.
I have not read that.
It is a world outlook shattering book for a lot of people. And the short version, the Cliff's Notes, is that it's written by a person who has multiple PhDs. His name is Matt Ridley, and one of his PhDs is in biology genetics, and the other is in economics. He had kind of two different careers. He's an older guy and spent a time as a scientist in that field, but then he went into banking and economics later in life and kind of transitioned. And so he kind of takes an interesting look at humanity as from the biological standpoint. He makes the argument that we are evolved to be pessimistic. But through our rational thought processes, we can actually look at the data that shows that a lot of the things that we think about how horrible the world are part of our natural bias towards pessimism. But in reality, if you look at any way of measuring human flourishing, it's much better to be alive right now than it was in the year 1800. In terms of access to calories, access to medicine, access to heating and cooling and clean water, and all the things that would measure whether or not life sucks. And so I recommend that. So I'm a natural optimist anyway. But one of the things that I've looked at with this through our choir lens is, okay, so they're telling us it might not be safe to sing with large numbers of people in confined place. Okay. So if that's the case, I might have to make my classes smaller. We might have to get creative with the scheduling so that there's enough time slots in the day for me to see all the kids. But in smaller groups, we might have to find a bigger place to sing so that we can spread out more. That is a possibility. Okay, so what are the positives of that? Again, peripheral hearing, part independence. Will it rip off the Band-Aid for a lot of kids that are not able to sing confidently right away, but in that spread out environment are going to have to, or else they won't hear their own part. I can see tons of positives in that. In my environment too, with big choirs, where I have a choir of 85 and a choir of 60, for example, that oftentimes if you are one of the weaker singers going in, you fall through the cracks because all the other kids do the work around you, and then you never quite learn how to do it, and then you don't feel important. Well, maybe in this upcoming environment, everyone will have to be important.
They will know their value. They have value. That's so. Okay, have you read the book The Happiness Advantage by Sean Achor?
No, don't know that one.
Okay, Sean Achor is a happiness researcher, and he's written 2 books. Both are just dynamite, but he tells this story about lightning bugs, and lightning bugs light up to attract a mate. And there's this story about going out into the jungle, and they thought that they were seeing beacons, but really they were seeing all these lightning bugs on trees lighting at the same time. And the scientists back in the States said that's not possible because then they'd have no way to attract a mate because they'd all be lighting.
Mm.
And they go and find out that actually when you're blinking all at the same time, you're blinking brighter. And it was something like 86% more insects mated that way. And so I think that's going to be the key. Yeah, we are all blinking in different ways, but if we can start blinking together, even if it takes you a second to get on the same blinky as the person beside you, we'll be 86% more likely to be successful.
Right.
I don't know. You have to read it. I'll send you those information if you send me that book that you were just talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea. Yeah. So, I mean, I can think of, um, the advantages. I think it's a natural inclination is um, if I'm told I have to change the way I'm doing it, I'm going to look for the the ways that I can sell that as a positive to my students.
Yes.
Because ultimately, if I walk into the classroom next year and start talking about all the things that are not safe and not allowed to do, then that will be conveyed to them and internalized by them because they look up to me as,
Mhm.
as well. We can't do anything fun this year in choir, so
Wah, wah. It's a
yep,
Debbie
yeah,
Downer right
exactly,
away. I
yep,
think that nugget is the nugget I want to remember forever. Look at what we're being told, be willing to change, and then find a way to make it optimistic.
hmm
Be real. The kids know we're all changing together. But I
yeah,
think that's the key. If you walk in with your head high and your heart in the right place, keeping the main thing, we still get to work with young people. We still get to make music in some way.
yeah, yep.
I'm excited.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think so too. And I think um, if you're in an environment in a place next year, next school year, or next season, wherever you work, uh, where some singing becomes possible, and like as we said at the beginning of our conversation, the singing might look different than we're used to it looking, and as a result, might sound different. Um, but lead my suggestion to people would be lead the conversation with the things that this new way of doing it might allow you to learn that our old way didn't allow you to learn, and let's focus on that. So I'm going to be focusing with my kids on this is going to make you a better listener because we're more spread out. It's going to make your confidence in your own vocal onset and making of resonant sound is going to have to be better because you'll need to hear yourself, and so it's going to make you a better singer, and it's going to make you more independent because you're not going to be able to rely on the singer next to you to always sing the right note right away. These are going to be the things that I'll probably lead my classroom at the very beginning of the year. And if I'm being really picky and detailed, will there be certain disadvantages to the process? Of course. But we don't need to talk about that.
Mm-mm.
We already know all the disadvantages.
Right.
We don't need to focus on that. And plus, it doesn't help the classroom environment at all.
Not at all. But you set clear objectives. That's something we set out with our choir and we started talking about what we want and confidence and collaborations and they wanted to fall in love with new elements of music. So
Hmm
we're doing a unit on composing. I've broken my year down into units. We're doing a unit on composing. We're doing a unit on visiting places and having friends take their phone and show us their rehearsal space and talking about acoustics and
hmm
little things that we're just getting creative, but it's a collaborative process between the people that I'm singing with and teaching and what we're doing. So
Right.
I'm very excited to hear what happens with your class and all
Yeah,
of your kiddos.
I am too. I'm excited to mostly know, well, nervous, but also excited to know what our limitations will be so that I can just start to get to work.
Mhm.
And I think that's not special to me. We're all in that boat.
Mhm.
Yes, we know things are going to look different, but just tell me what it's going to look like so that I can start to plan. Um, and I think that's natural. Like we're all going to be feeling a lot of self doubt and a lot of wondering if what we're going to do is going to work. Like one of the things that I'm worried about is if I can't, if I know we're supposed to talk about optimistic things, but
It's okay. Be real.
One of the things that's stressing me right now is that if it looks so much different, that it makes it difficult for me to create the engaging environment that is um, as social and interactive as choir really needs to be to reach a lot of people. Will that negatively affect my enrollment in future years so much that the program becomes permanently damaged? That is a real concern that I think a lot of people have. Is
Yes,
yes,
we
we
have
can
to stay afloat.
yes, we have to justify our jobs, and if we can talk a big game about how cool all the online stuff is that we're talking about doing, but ultimately that's not why kids take our class. And if we lose sight of that, it might be naive and dangerous. Because I think it would be dangerous to look at our choir classes as a fixed pie. The size of the pie is going to change if we can't sing together. That is a reality, because a lot of kids come to singing because of the social aspect first, and then get hooked by the music aspect later.
Mm-hmm.
And so we still have to be able to put kids in a room together and sing, or else they will quit.
Right.
And I know that seems like doom and gloom all of a sudden, but that's kind of the balance that I'm trying to figure out.
That's the reality of the situation. You can have all of these things, but it goes back to the main thing has to be the main thing.
Yep.
And yes, the people and the musical product, but still keeping them engaged and looking. This is such a good conversation to get creative juices flowing, though. Both the pros and the cons, and the optimism and the pessimism, and all the things.
Right.
I knew you would be so much fun to talk to. I just had no doubt that this would be the easiest conversation.
Yeah, I don't like to script my show anyway. So
I don't
hopefully
either. I can't script. You'll know if I'm reading, because I do this thing where I'm giving away all my secrets. If I'm reading, I go off at the end of the sentence, and it's so bad. You know for a fact if I'm reading, I'm not transparent at all.
Yeah, that's kind of how I am too. I've gotten a little bit better at it. When I was first started out the show, I tried to type out quite a bit of the stuff just because I would ramble without notes. But I've just gotten better at it. I actually feel more comfortable now, just engaging in what I'm hearing, and honestly, it's made me a better listener too.
I noticed that. It's crazy. I don't feel the need to talk as much. Yeah, praise Jesus.
Yeah, no, I'm afraid I still love to talk, but that makes it a good job for a podcaster. I just have discovered that by my skill at listening helps my talking. If that makes sense. It's not that talking itself is bad. It's just that it makes a better conversation but I feel like we just don't have very many chances to do stuff like this outside of the podcast medium, because like I said at the beginning, if you go to an ACDA conference and you go to a session, that's pretty much a one-way thing.
One-sided.
Yeah.
And you can never really ask the questions that you're like, okay, you almost addressed that, unless you find that person and nail them down for a coffee or something, which is nearly impossible. Right. And then you get so far removed by the time you connect that doesn't make the same thing. So I'm thankful for our little podcast platform.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's important. Hopefully can create pardon the virus pun, but hopefully can create a vaccine against memes and their pernicious influence on our understanding of complex issues. Because
yes.
Even outside of this COVID-19 stuff, the world is super complicated, and you can't understand it from a news article that says 4-minute read at the top.
Right.
You just can't. And so it's through conversation, back and forth, having an idea bounced off another person who then sends back an idea at you that is slightly different than how you thought of it before. That's how our brains process and how it's learned. And I think we're missing that in society at large. So I love podcasts.
This was really fun. I'm very thankful
absolutely.
that you were willing to do this.
Yeah, very fun. And we'll have to do it again sometime, because I feel like we're just scratching the surface of what new and interesting things we're going to have to come up with in the next year or two
Mhm.
to keep our ship afloat.
I agree, and it's so cool to like I said, from being on 2 different ends of the spectrum, I feel like you have this big circle thing going around that most of the world of choir directors has, and I'm unfortunately, like, over here with the collegiate world and over here with the community choir world, and we're rotating, but we're not always intersecting, so this was
Mhm.
really helpful for me as a professor to say, okay, these are some things that have to be addressed in addition to all the other methods based things that they learn.
Right. Well, and the things that if we can't fix the potential enrollment problems in the public school that we're
Mhm.
facing in the next year or two or five,
Mhm.
then goodbye collegiate programs.
Right. There's no
You know,
reason for us to exist if there's nowhere for them to go to get jobs.
right? And or they won't come to you with any skills in the in our field.
Right.
And so yeah, so we are intersected. We are
Mhm.
intertwined. Without the public school programs instilling, in most cases, that first love of music, they're not going to sign up for the community choirs either.
No, they
Uh,
won't. And that's so it's so much fun to teach secondary and hear them talk about their high school teachers. That's one of my favorite first day, tell me your number one memory from high school.
mhm.
And it is always choir based.
Yeah, yeah,
I love
yeah.
it.
It's a special thing that we do, and want to fight like hell to preserve it. Do you allow hell on your podcast? Oh, you froze.
This flew by. Do you know it's 12:30? That's 11:30 your time. Don't you have another call?
I do have to get up to the school soon and file some music, so
Oh,
we
okay.
should go ahead and sign off.
I'm so sorry. I thought I had the clock going, but I was so enthralled that
Oh
I
no,
wasn't
no, it's
paying
not.
any attention to the
No, it's not
time.
your
I'm
fault.
so sorry.
No, it's not your fault. It's fine. I've got a couple seconds to sign off here. Well, thank you so much, Emmy.
See you again.
Thank you so much, as always, for sticking around to the end of an episode. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I think Emmy is a breath of fresh air on the choral podcast scene. So, of course, remember to go check out her show and subscribe. I am just in a state, of course, at this point in the year of being ready for something that feels like normal. I'm sure all of you guys are. I know that this is a pretty rough time. There's a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety out there, a lot of just freaking out about the future. And so, what I would invite everybody to do is kind of like Emmy and I just discussed, figuring out ways to have our heads on swivels and constantly adjusting. If our idea is that unless things can be like they were, we can't be successful, then we are doomed as a profession. But also, guys, this is bigger than that. It's bigger than the choral music world. Our entire planet is in severe risk right now. And yes, there is risk from a virus, but there is also risk from human panic that is going on right now. And I know you can all see it. Panic instincts that are biologically hardwired into us, right? When we're afraid, we make bad decisions. So I would encourage you to take a deep breath and make decisions that look forward, make decisions that make plans even though you are uncertain, and try to figure out the best possible way to instruct our kids when we get the chance to do that again, so that they can also become adaptable to a new world and to a new, I hate the expression new normal, but as I've explained on previous episodes, I also kind of reject the concept that there ever was a normal. The world is constantly changing. My goodness, in my 40 years, the average daily life of people in this country is so different than it was when I was a kid. And you guys all know, depending on your age range, that that's the case. So we will continue to adapt. We probably haven't ever had to adapt this fast. but it is something that we have to learn how to do as humans. And in order to be successful and happy, we have to have that attitude, the attitude of adaptation and adjusting to our scenario and adjusting to our surroundings. So this episode hopefully allowed you to do that. On the way out, I just would, of course, encourage you and beg you for your help in spreading the word about this show. There are all kinds of ways that you can help the Choralosophy podcast achieve its mission of continued thoughtful dialogue on the choral profession and, of course, on the philosophies that govern us in general. Number one, if you have not yet subscribed on an app, please do that. If you have not yet rated the app, rated the podcast in an app, that's very, very helpful. It provides more visibility for the show to other listeners. So in the Apple Podcast app, you can do that. On Facebook, you can do that. You can actually rate my show and leave a review there. There's other things, of course, joining the Patreon I discussed earlier, hitting up the sponsors of the show and using the promo code. Those are all ways to let them know you're listening. So using that Choralosophy at checkout code at Sight Reading Factory, at vocevista.com/choralosophy, at ryanmain.com for sheet music, and at graphitepublishing.com for sheet music as well. You can use that Choralosophy checkout code to get 10% off, and also helps a lot with my show. So all those things are options. And of course, if any episode that you go back and scroll through the feed turns out to be very helpful to you, I encourage you to share it. Grab the link off my website or off the Apple Podcast app or wherever you listen, or Spotify, and share that so other people can hear it as well. And we can continue to grow our community over on the Choralosophers Facebook page. Guys, I appreciate you all so much. Again, this is a tough time, and I'm just going to keep on plugging out content for you to consider and to hopefully expand our choral conversation during this pandemic, and hopefully return to something that feels like normal. See you guys later.